Hi guys! So you may or may not be aware that tomorrow, the 19th of January, marks the beginning of the second ever Underhyped readathon, and this runs to the 25th of January, and like the name implies, is basically a week in which you try to read books that are underhyped. So books you haven't heard a lot about, haven't seen on BookTube. Some people have decided to go for a number of ratings on Goodreads that these books are under, say 5,000 or 1,000. And this readathon was started and is run by Charlotte over at Ramblings of an Elfpire, whose announcement video I will link below, as well as the Goodreads group. Fortunately this time around I can't take part, just because things are crazy busy at uni, but I love the concept for this readathon and I'd really like to support it. And I also have a very special place in my heart for underhyped books, so I thought I would preemptively film a video in which I briefly talk about some of my favourite underhyped books, so that those of you who are taking part next week might have some inspiration, and just in general I can share a little love for some underhyped books. For the definition of underhyped, I've gone for under 1,000 ratings on Goodreads. Okay, so first up is a book that I was actually really surprised to see was under 1,000 ratings on Goodreads, and that is Elijah's Mermaid by S.A. Fox. You might have heard me mention this book before. I did do a review for it last year and I thoroughly enjoyed this book. Not only does it have a beautiful cover, but it has a beautiful story and some beautiful writing within. It is set during the 1800s and follows three young people whose lives intersect and a mystery arises. I don't want to say too much more about the plot because it is a very mysterious and surprising novel, and I think that you should discover that for yourself. But if you enjoy period set books, if you enjoy mysteries, if you just enjoy eloquent, beautiful writing, not to mention a little bit of historical background, and this book is something I would thoroughly recommend checking out. Next is a graphic novel, or manga, and that is the manga biography of Che Guevara. Now this is published by Penguin, and the author and artist names I just can't pronounce, so there they are. I'm sure you're all aware of who Che Guevara is. He was a communist or socialist revolutionary during the mid-1900s and played a major part in the Cuban Revolution. I, like you, I'm sure knew of Che Guevara and knew vaguely of what he'd done and who he was, but this little book gave me a really interesting insight into his journey and how he got there and how his life progressed during that time in a really fun way. I've always thought that graphic novels and manga make an incredible way to portray non-fiction books. I think they're a really interesting way to share information and a really fun and easy way. And this book is an excellent introduction to the history of Che Guevara, so I would check it out. Next is a book that I've spoke about recently and recently done a review for, but I couldn't not include it when I saw how few reviews it had on Goodreads, and that is Hold Your Own by Kate Tempest. This is a book of poetry, all structured around the ancient Greek myth of the prophet Tiresias, and I just want to gush about this book every time I hold it up. It was absolutely beautiful, and I will link my review for it down below if you want to find out more about it. I do want to say that I think whether you are a poet, connoisseur, or have barely been exposed to the genre, this book is for you. Next book I want to mention I don't have a physical copy of with me because I read it when I was in high school, and it is Roxys Be Buried by Catherine McPhail. I guess this book would come into the YA genre, although when I read it I really wasn't aware that YA was a thing, if it was, because it was quite a long time ago. Definitely don't let that put you off, because my mum also read it shortly after I did. It follows the tale of Roxy, who has unfortunately become a teen pregnancy, unsure what to do, ends up in quite a weird situation in which she ends up in a house full of young pregnant women. And it seems like the people who own the home and are taking care of them are going to help Roxy and her baby. Unfortunately, the situation may be too good to be true. So if you like mysteries, dramas, thrillers, or just kind of gritty contemporary young adults, then I'd really recommend checking this out. Catherine McPhail is not an author I hear about on BookTube ever really, and I read quite a few of her books when I was in high school and loved them. Next is another young adult book, another gritty young adult book, and that is Benjamin Zephaniah's Terror Kid. I've done a full review of this as well, so I'll link that below. I suspect that the reason this doesn't have that many reviews on Goodreads yet is it did only come out last year. But that's not going to stop me mentioning it, because I really enjoyed this. I think this is the kind of book that needs to be more heavily featured in the YA genre. It follows the story of Rico, who's a computer whiz, and he gets pulled in to a sort of underground domestic terrorist organisation who ask him to do some hacking. He just thinks it's a bit of online activism, very passive. It turns out he's been tricked. I just love that this is a political YA book. I just don't think there's enough of these, or at least not that I'm aware of, and they definitely aren't hyped enough. And lastly, I'm going to mention a children's book, and that is Goodknyght by Steve Buylow and Steve Skidmore. This is the first in a 4-part children's fantasy series that I did read when I was a child, but they have stayed with me throughout my life, and I would quite happily go back and read them again if I could find my copy of Goodknyght. The series is called The Tales of the Dark Forest. They are essentially just comic fantasies. They're definitely one of the early series that got me into the comic fantasy genre. They contain the kind of jokes and puns that just would make anyone laugh, whether they're 8 or 80, and I would highly recommend checking them out if you're into your children's literature. I think that's enough to be getting along with just now. I don't want this video to go on forever and ever, but if you have read any of these books or plan on reading any of these books, let me know, and good luck if you are participating in the readathon. In the meantime, happy reading. Bye guys!